The Alpha King entered the dungeon for a prisoner and found his fated Luna instead. Chapter 1. The Alpha King entered the dungeon for a prisoner and found his fated Luna instead. The storm that night was the worst in a century. Wind screamed across the Ironcrag Mountains like a dying god, hurling snow so thick it swallowed Torchlight whole. Blackthorn Keep crouched on the cliff's edge, its walls black with old blood and older grief, and beneath it, carved into the living rock, the Inquisition's dungeons waited. Ilara Voss had stopped counting days. They had taken her boots, her cloak, even the leather cord that once held back her hair. All that remained was a thin linen shift, crusted with grime, and the silver manacles that burned cold against her wrists. The church called them mercies. Silver kept witches from weaving spells. It also kept the flesh raw and the bones aching. She sat in the darkest corner of her cell, knees drawn to her chest, listening to the storm batter the world above. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled like war drums. She wondered distantly if the pyre they had promised her at dawn would even light in this weather. Perhaps the gods had decided to drown her instead of burn her. Then the torches in the corridor guttered all at once. A new scent cut through the rot and damp. Pine, ice, and something feral. Something alive in a way nothing down here had been for weeks. Heavy boots descended the stair. Not the nervous shuffle of the guards, not the pious click of the Inquisitor's heels. These were the footsteps of a man who had never asked permission for anything in his life. The warden's voice cracked like a whip, trying to sound brave. "My lord, truly, there is nothing here worth your time. Only condemned witches and heretics. Open every gate," the newcomer said. His voice was low thunder wrapped in velvet, the kind that made knees bend before the mind caught up. "I will see them all." Ilara's head snapped up. Keys rattled. Iron groaned. Cell doors she had never seen open now swung wide. Prisoners whimpered. One old man began praying in the tongue of the drowned saints. And then he was there. He filled the doorway as if the stone itself had birthed him. Tall enough that he had to duck beneath the lintel, broad enough that the torchlight seemed to shrink from his shoulders. A travel-stained cloak of wolf pelt hung from his back, the silver fur still rimed with snow. Long black hair, wet from the storm, clung to a face carved from winter itself. High cheekbones, a mouth that looked made for commands and curses in equal measure, and eyes the pale, impossible gray of glacier hearts. Alpha King Lucian Blackthorn. The man who had torn the northern throne from his father's corpse and refused to bow to the church. The man whose pack now ruled every forest from the Icefang Ridge to the sea. The man whose name mothers whispered to frighten children into obedience. He was supposed to be half a continent away, fighting border wars against the southern kingdoms. Yet here he stood, scanning the row of cells with the patience of a predator who already knew where his prey hid. His gaze moved past the trembling thieves, past the mad prophet clawing at his own face, past the girl who had tried to poison her lord, and locked on Ilara. The world narrowed to those storm-gray eyes. Something inside her chest lurched so violently she forgot how to breathe. Lucian's nostrils flared, subtle, almost imperceptible. His pupils blew wide, black swallowing silver. A muscle ticked in his jaw, and for one impossible second the most powerful werewolf alive looked as though someone had struck him across the soul. The warden babbled on, oblivious. "This one is scheduled for burning at first light, my lord. A hedge witch from the Hollow. They say she called lightning to murder an entire village." "Name," Lucian said. The single word cracked like ice breaking. "Ilara Voss, my lord." Lucian stepped forward. The warden scurried to unlock her cell, hands shaking so badly the key scraped iron 3 times before it caught. Ilara rose slowly, chains clinking. She was tall for a woman, but he still towered over her. Up close, the heat radiating from him cut through the dungeon's chill like a blade through snow. His scent flooded her senses. Wild, dangerous, and unbearably alive. She lifted her chin. If you've come to watch me burn, Alpha King, you'll be disappointed. The storm will drown the kindling before the flames ever touch me. A faint, startled huff escaped him. Almost a laugh, gone as quickly as it came. I'm not here to watch anything burn, he said. His voice was quieter now, pitched for her ears alone. Something in it, some raw note she could not name, made her skin prickle. The warden swung the cell door wide. Lucian did not move to enter. Instead, he reached up and unclasped his cloak. The heavy wolf pelt slid from his shoulders and into his hands. He held it out to her. Alara stared. What is this? Put it on, he said. You're cold. She was. She had been cold so long she had forgotten warmth had a name. Still, she did not take it. I don't accept gifts from wolves. His eyes narrowed, but not in anger. Something far more dangerous flickered there. Curiosity, hunger, recognition. Then don't think of it as a gift, he said. Think of it as a command from your king. You are not my king. The words left her mouth before caution could stop them. The warden gasped. Somewhere down the corridor, a prisoner began to sob. Lucian's lips curved, slow and lethal. Tonight, he said, voice dropping to a growl that vibrated through the stone beneath her bare feet. I am whatever I decide to be. He stepped into the cell. The door clanged shut behind him, locked from the outside by the trembling warden who clearly wanted no part of what came next. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. She had faced inquisitors with hot irons. She had watched her village burn. She had not felt fear like this since she was a child hiding beneath her mother's table while the wolves howled outside. Lucian crouched, bringing his eyes level with hers. The cloak still hung from his hand like an offering. Up close, she could see the faint scars that crossed his brow, the shadow of exhaustion beneath the predator's mask. And something else. Pain. Ancient and carefully banked. Alara Voss, he said, tasting her name like wine and blood. Do you know why I came down here tonight? Because you enjoy watching humans squirm? This time the huff was definitely a laugh, low and reluctant. No, he said. I came for a prisoner. Someone the church promised could end a war. His gaze swept over her face, searching, memorizing. I wasn't expecting you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she did not yet understand. The storm above roared louder, as if the sky itself protested what was happening in the dark beneath the world. Lucian extended the cloak again. This time, her fingers closed around the fur before her mind could refuse. The instant the pelt touched her skin, warmth flooded through her like sunrise after endless night. And beneath the warmth, something else. An awareness, sharp and electric, as though the cloak carried his heartbeat straight into her veins. His eyes flared again, brighter, wilder. Careful, little witch, he murmured, so softly she almost missed it over the storm. Some things, once touched, can never be untouched. Alara met his gaze, silver chains glinting between them like bars neither of them acknowledged anymore. Then maybe, she whispered, I was never meant to stay untouched. Far above, lightning split the sky in two, and in the dungeon beneath Blackthorn Keep, a wolf king looked at a condemned witch and felt, for the first time in 300 years, the mating bond snap taut around his immortal soul. Chapter 2. The Weight of Wolf Fur. The cloak was too heavy, too warm, and smelled so fiercely of him that Alara's head spun. She clutched the silver-gray pelt around her shoulders like armor and tried to remember how to breathe. Lucian remained crouched in front of her, motionless, as though sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile thing had just sparked between them. The silence stretched, thick as the storm outside. Finally he spoke, voice roughened to a whisper. "You're shaking." "Cold," she lied. His gaze dropped to her wrists where the manacles had rubbed the skin to bleeding. Something dark and murderous flickered across his face. When he reached for her hands, she flinched. Instinct. Not fear of him, but of any touch after weeks of nothing but pain. He froze, palm open between them. "May I?" Alara stared at the offered hand. Broad, scarred. The knuckles, dusted with old silver burns that matched her own fresh ones. A wolf wearing silver scars. That was wrong. Silver was poison to his kind. She gave the smallest nod. His fingers closed around the manacle on her left wrist. Heat flared, not burning, but intense, like stepping too close to a hearth after years in the snow. The silver softened, bending like warm wax, and fell away with a dull clink. He did the same to the right. The sudden absence of pain made her gasp. "How?" she breathed. Lucian didn't answer. He was staring at the raw circles of skin as if they offended him on a level deeper than anger. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted her wrist to his lips and pressed the lightest kiss to the worst of the wounds. The dungeon tilted. It wasn't seduction. It was reverence. A silent apology from a creature who probably never apologized for anything. Alara's pulse thundered so loudly she was sure he heard it. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone should have done it weeks ago," he said against her skin. Then, quieter, "Because I'm too late to stop what already hurt you." The confession slipped out like a blade from its sheath. Unexpected, dangerous, impossible to ignore. She pulled her hand back, but gently. "You don't know me. I know the church took an entire village to get to one woman." His eyes lifted, storm gray and unreadable. "I know they burned children to make you scream. I know you didn't break." Alara's throat closed. She had not spoken of the night they dragged her from the ashes. She had not allowed herself to remember the smell of her little brother's hair catching fire. "How?" she managed again. Lucian rose. The cell felt smaller with him standing. "Walk with me." "You locked us in." A faint, crooked smile ghosted across his mouth, the first real one she had seen, and it nearly undid her. "I have the key." He produced an iron key from his belt and unlocked the door as easily as if it had never been barred. The warden was nowhere in sight, probably hiding from whatever terrified him more, the Alpha or the storm. Lucian offered his arm, courtly and absurd in a dungeon. Alara ignored it and stepped past him into the corridor. The wolf pelt cloak trailed behind her like a royal train. He led her not up toward the keep, but deeper. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere the walls don't listen." They descended another spiral. Older. The stones black with age and damp. The torches here were unlit. Lucian touched each as they passed, and they flared to life with pale silver flame that owed nothing to oil or pitch. Witchlight. But he was no witch. At the bottom lay a cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. A hot spring steamed in the center, fed by some geothermal vein deep in the mountain. The air smelled of minerals and pine. Someone had scattered needles across the stone floor. Lucian shrugged out of his leather jerkin and laid it on a rock, then knelt to unlace his boots with the same unhurried calm he did everything else. Alara watched, suspicion warring with exhaustion. "I'm not bathing with you," she said flatly. "I'm not asking you to." He didn't look up. "The water will ease the hurts the silver left. You can keep the cloak on if you want. Or burn it. I don't care." But your wounds need cleaning, and the keep's healers are all church-sworn. They'd finish what the manacles started. He stood, barefoot on the stone, and finally met her eyes. I'll turn my back. You have my word. The word of a wolf? The word of Lucian Blackthorn, he corrected softly. It has never been given lightly. Something in the way he said it told her it had never been given at all. Alara hesitated, then let the cloak slip from her shoulders. The shift beneath was little more than rags. Modesty was a luxury she'd lost weeks ago. She stepped into the pool. The heat was shocking, perfect, painful in the way that meant healing. She sank until the water lapped at her collarbones and let out a shuddering breath she hadn't known she was holding. Behind her, stones scraped. She glanced back. Lucian had seated himself on the edge of the pool, back to her, elbows on his knees. Moonlight, impossible moonlight, filtered through some crack high above and painted silver across the broad expanse of his shoulders. The scars she had glimpsed earlier were worse in the pale light. Old claw marks, burns, a jagged line across his ribs that looked like it had come from something with too many teeth. He was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, terrifying and alive and utterly untamed. Minutes passed, measured only by dripping water and her own slowing heartbeat. "Why did you really come to the dungeon tonight?" she asked the quiet. A long pause. "There's a war coming," he said at last. "South of the ridge, the church is raising an army of silver-clad paladins. They claim the North Harbor's unholy creatures." His mouth twisted. "They're not entirely wrong." Alara's fingers tightened on the rock. "And they told you there was a prisoner here who could stop it?" "They told me there was a weapon." His voice dropped. A bloodline old enough to turn the tide. "They said the Inquisition had caught her. I came to buy her freedom, or steal it if I had to." She went very still. "You think that's me?" "I don't know what you are," he admitted. "But the moment I saw you, something in my blood howled so loudly, I thought the mountain would crack." He turned then, just enough that she saw his profile against the moonlit steam. "And you felt it too. Don't lie." Alara couldn't. The pull was a living thing, coiled around her ribs, tugging her toward him even now. She rose from the water, clutching the soaked shift to her chest, and stepped out. The cloak waited where she had left it. She wrapped it around, herself again like a shield. Lucian hadn't moved, but every muscle in his back was rigid. "I'm not a weapon," she said. "No," he agreed quietly. "You're something far more dangerous." Their eyes met across the steam. Outside, the storm began to quiet, as though the world itself held its breath. Chapter 3. The Mark Beneath the Skin. The cloak clung to her wet skin, heavy and warm, as if it refused to let the cold find her again. Alara stood 3 paces from Lucian, close enough to see the faint tremor in his shoulders, far enough that the steam still curled between them like a living barrier. He hadn't turned fully. Only his head had angled toward her, moonlight carving silver along the sharp line of his jaw. His eyes glowed faintly, not human, never human, yet the hunger in them wasn't for flesh. It was something older, rawer. "Tell me what you felt," he said, voice barely louder than the drip of water from the cavern ceiling. "When I stepped into your cell, tell me I didn't imagine it." Alara's tongue felt thick. Lies would have been easier. She had survived weeks of inquisitors by giving them nothing true. But the words that rose now tasted like truth and terror in equal measure. "It was like falling," she whispered. "Like the floor vanished and something caught me by the heart instead of my body." Lucian closed his eyes. A shudder moved through him, visible even beneath muscle and scar. When he opened them again, The glow had deepened to molten silver. "That," he said, "is the bond. The one my kind spend lifetimes praying for. Or dreading." She took one involuntary step closer. "Your kind." He laughed, a sound without humor. "Still clinging to the hope I'm only a man, little witch?" "I cling to nothing anymore." The confession slipped out before she could cage it. Lucian turned then, fully, slowly, as though any sudden movement might send her fleeing back into the dark. The moonlight painted every scar, every ridge of old pain across his chest. At the hollow of his throat, just above the collarbone, a mark caught the light. A crescent moon bisected by a single claw. It was blacker than ink, raised like a brand, and it pulsed faintly, as if alive. Alara's breath caught. She had seen that mark once before, carved into the ancient standing stone behind her grandmother's cottage. The moon claw. The sigil of the first alpha, the one who bargained with the old gods for the gift, and the curse of the wolf. "You're not just a werewolf," she said. "No." His voice was raw gravel. "I am the last of the true bloodline, the one the church has hunted for 3 centuries. They call me monster. My own pack calls me king. Both are true." He watched her face, waiting for horror, for disgust. Instead, Alara felt something inside her chest crack open. Not fear, but recognition. She had been hunted too. Branded too. Named monster by people who feared what they could not control. She took another step. The cloak brushed his bare knees. "Why does the bond choose now?" she asked. "Why me?" Lucian's hands flexed at his sides, fingers curling as if fighting the urge to reach for her. "I don't know. The gods are cruel and silent. Maybe they waited until I was broken enough to deserve something pure. Or maybe they waited until you were." The words struck deeper than any blade. Alara's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing tears. "I'm not pure," she said. "I have blood on my hands. The night they came for me, I called the lightning. I didn't mean to kill anyone, but I was angry and terrified, and the sky answered. Children died, Lucian. Because of me." Her voice cracked on his name. She hadn't meant to use it. He moved then, finally, closing the distance in one stride. His hands rose but stopped a breath from her face, asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he cupped her cheeks with exquisite care, thumbs brushing the hollows beneath her eyes as if he could erase every tear she refused to shed. "Listen to me," he said, fierce and low. "The storm didn't kill those children. The men who lit torches and dragged mothers from their beds did. You were a girl trying to protect her own. I have done far worse for far less." His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, returned to her eyes. "I have lived 312 years, Alara. I have watched empires rot and forests burn. I stopped believing in redemption centuries ago. And then I walked into a dungeon, and the world narrowed to one trembling woman wrapped in rags and defiance." He rested his forehead against hers. The contact sent sparks skittering across her skin. "I don't know what this is," he whispered, "but I know I will burn the church to ash before I let them touch you again." The vow hung between them, ancient and unbreakable. Alara's hands rose of their own accord, settling against his chest. His heart thundered beneath her palms. Too fast, too hard for anything human. She traced the raised edges of the moon claw brand. The skin was fever hot. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Only when I fight it." His voice dropped to a growl that vibrated through her bones. "The full moon is 3 nights away. The curse wants blood and mating and dominion. I have denied it for centuries. Tonight it feels like denying breath." She should have been terrified. Instead, a reckless courage bloomed inside her, born of exhaustion, of fury, of the simple, savage need to no longer be alone. "And if you stop denying?" she heard herself ask. Lucian went utterly still. Even his heartbeat seemed to pause. "Don't," he said, the word ragged. "Don't offer what you don't understand." "I understand chains," she said. "I understand cages. I understand what it is to have something inside you that the world wants to kill." Her fingers curled against his skin. "Show me the rest." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then, slowly, he took her right hand and pressed it flat over the moonclaw mark. The brand flared beneath her palm, white-hot, alive, pulsing in time with something deep in her own chest. A gasp tore from her throat. Images flooded her mind, not memories, but sensations. Running on 4 legs through snow so deep it swallowed sound. The taste of copper and pine, moonlight like liquid silver pouring over fur. The exquisite agony of bones reshaping, of becoming more. And beneath it all, centuries of loneliness so vast it was its own wilderness. The connection snapped shut as quickly as it opened. Alara staggered. Lucian caught her, arms banding around her waist, pulling her against the solid wall of his chest. "Breathe," he commanded, voice shaking. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." She clutched fistfuls of his shirt, anchoring herself. "That was you?" "Pieces," he rasped. "The wolf doesn't think in words. It feels." Alara lifted her face. Their mouths were a whisper apart. "I'm not afraid of your wolf," she said. Lucian's eyes bled fully silver. A growl rumbled from his chest, not threat, but surrender. "Then you are braver than any creature I have ever met." Somewhere far above, a bell began to toll midnight. The sound echoed down through stone, cold and ominous. Lucian's head snapped toward the stair. His entire body coiled, predator listening. "They know I'm here," he said. "The Inquisitors. They'll come for you at dawn no matter what bargain I offer. We have to leave. Now." Alara's heart lurched. "Where?" "North," he said. "Beyond their reach. Into the heart of my territory." His gaze returned to her, fierce and pleading all at once. "Come with me, Alara. Let me keep the promise I just made." She looked at the moonclaw brand still glowing faintly between them, at the scars that mapped a life of war and solitude, at the eyes that had seen 3 centuries and somehow still held hope. Then she nodded. Lucian exhaled as if the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He pressed one swift, reverent kiss to her forehead, chaste and shattering, before stepping back. "Stay close," he said. "The storm is our ally tonight." As they moved toward the hidden passage he had scented earlier, Alara realized the cloak no longer felt like borrowed warmth. It felt like coming home. And somewhere deep in the mountain, the wolf howled, not in rage, but in exultation. Chapter 4: Flight Through the White Dark. The passage Lucian led her into was older than the keep itself, a throat of black stone that smelled of ice and forgotten wolf. No torches here, only the faint silver glow that leaked from his eyes lit their way. Alara's bare feet found purchase on frost-slick rock, guided by the steady pressure of his hand at the small of her back. The cloak, his cloak, swept the ground behind her like a living shadow. They climbed in silence for what felt like hours, lungs burning with cold, until a sliver of night sky appeared above. Wind howled through the gap, flinging snow into their faces. Lucian paused at the threshold, head cocked, listening to things she could not hear. "Guards on the eastern wall," he murmured. "2 patrols between us and the forest. The storm hides scent, but silver arrows fly straight." Alara's heart hammered. "Can we outrun them?" A ghost of a smile curved his mouth. "We don't run. We vanish. Before she could ask what that meant, he stepped into the blizzard and simply changed. It was not the grotesque tearing of flesh she had heard in tavern tales. It was fluid, inevitable, like water becoming ice. One moment a man stood before her. The next, a wolf the size of a warhorse filled the passage, black as the heart of the storm, silver-tipped fur glittering with snow. Eyes the same storm gray looked back at her, no less Lucian for the shape he wore. He lowered his great head and nudged the cloak at her throat, gentle as a question. Alara's fingers sank into the thick ruff at his neck. Warm. Impossibly warm. She pressed her forehead to his for one trembling heartbeat, breathing him in. "I'm still not afraid," she whispered. The wolf rumbled approval, then turned and leapt into the night. She followed, half carried, half running, the cloak billowing behind her like wings. Snow swallowed sound. The world became white silence and the steady thunder of his paws. Arrows hissed past once, twice, but the storm bent their paths, and the wolf was already gone, a shadow among shadows. They ran until the keep was a dying ember on the cliff behind them, and the forest rose like a black cathedral ahead. Only then did Lucian slow, shifting mid-stride back into the man. Snow clung to his hair and lashes. His breath plumed silver. He caught her as she stumbled, exhausted. Almost there. "Where?" she gasped. He tilted his head toward the tree line. "A safe den. Old pack refuge. No one will find us before dawn." Alara nodded, too tired for questions. He swept her into his arms without asking, simply did it, as though her weight was nothing, and carried her the last league through drifts chest-deep on a mortal man. The den was a cave hidden behind a frozen waterfall. Inside, the air was warm, scented faintly of pine resin and old smoke. Someone had kept it ready, dry wood stacked beside a ring of stones, furs piled thick on a raised ledge of rock. A single oil lamp waited, wick trimmed, flint and steel laid neatly beside it. Lucian set her down on the furs, then knelt to light the lamp. Golden light bloomed, revealing walls painted centuries ago with scenes of wolves and moons, and women with starlight in their hair. Alara stared, throat tight. Her grandmother had told stories of the moon blessed, human women chosen by the gods to stand beside the first alpha. She had thought them bedtime tales. Lucian followed her, gaze. "My mother painted those," he said quietly, "before the church burned her for it." The shared grief hung between them, wordless. He busied himself building a fire, movements precise despite the tremor in his hands. When the flames caught, he sat back on his heels and finally looked at her. "You're hurt," he said. Only then did Alara notice the blood soaking his left side. An arrow had found its mark after all, buried deep just beneath his ribs. Silver feathers still protruded from the wound. She was on her knees beside him before she thought to move. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It's nothing." "It's silver, you idiot wolf." Panic sharpened her voice. "You carried me for leagues like this?" Lucian tried to wave her off, but she was already tearing strips from the hem of her ruined shift. Her hands shook as she pressed cloth to the wound. The arrow needed to come out, but pulling it would tear flesh worse. "Hold still," she ordered. He obeyed, jaw clenched, watching her face instead of the wound. "There's a knife in my boot." She found it. A thin, wicked blade of ordinary steel. Silver would have burned him. With the fire's help, she heated the blade until it glowed, then poured a splash from the small flask of spirits she found beside the lamp over the wound. Lucian hissed but didn't move. "This will hurt," she warned. "Do it." She cut the arrowhead free in one swift motion, then pressed the hot blade to the edges to cauterize. The smell of burnt flesh filled the den. Lucian's entire body went rigid. A low, continuous growl vibrated in his chest. but he never once pulled away. When it was done, she packed the wound with moss and bound it tight with the linen strips. Only then did she let herself sag against the furs, trembling from head to toe. Lucian's hand found hers, fingers threading through hers with desperate strength. "You should have let me die back there," he said hoarsely. "A dead alpha is worth more to my enemies than a live one with a weakness." Alara turned to him, fury and fear blazing together. Don't you dare make what I just felt mean nothing." His eyes searched hers, ancient and suddenly young. "What did you feel?" She swallowed. "Like losing you would rip the sky in half." The confession broke something open in him. Lucian cupped her face with both hands and rested his forehead against hers again, breathing her in as though she were air after centuries underwater. "I have waited 3 lifetimes for someone to look at me and not see the monster first," he whispered. "And you just cut silver out of my flesh without flinching." Alara's laugh was half a sob. "I flinched plenty. You just didn't see it." He brushed his thumb across her lower lip, reverent. "Stay with me tonight. Not—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Not for mating. Just stay. Let me hold the dark away from you for one night." The vulnerability in his voice undid her. She nodded. They lay together on the furs, fully clothed, her back to his chest, his arms locked around her as though the world might steal her if he loosened his grip even a fraction. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm quieted to a gentle mourning. Alara felt the steady thump of his heart against her spine, the careful way he kept the wounded side away from her. Sleep tugged at her edges, but before it claimed her, she turned in his arms to face him. "Lucian?" "The bond," she whispered. "When it snapped into place in the dungeon, did it hurt you too?" He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "It felt like coming alive after being stoned for 300 years. Alara pressed her palm over his heart, over the hidden Moonclaw brand that still burned beneath linen and skin. "Then we're both waking up," she said. His arms tightened. Outside the cave, the wind carried the distant howl of wolves, his pack, searching, calling. Lucian lifted his head and answered with a low, rolling note that vibrated through her bones. The howls ceased, replaced by a sense of watchful peace. Sleep took her then, cradled in the arms of a wolf who had never let anyone this close. But in the last moment before dreams claimed her, she felt it again. The faint, rhythmic pulse beneath her palm. Stronger now. The Moonclaw was answering her heartbeat, and somewhere far south, church bells began to toll the alarm. Chapter 5. The Taste of Moonlight. Alara woke to the hush that follows a storm. No wind, no thunder. Only the soft drip of melting ice from the cave mouth and the steady warmth curled around her back. For one disoriented heartbeat, she forgot where she was. Then Lucian's arm tightened across her waist, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. Half contentment, half warning to the world outside. She turned in the circle of his arms. Dawn had crept in on silent paws. Pale light painted the cave walls rose gold and turned the falling water into a curtain of liquid diamond. Lucian's eyes were already open, watching her with the stillness of a wolf that has waited all night for its prey to wake. "Morning," she whispered, voice rough with sleep. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, thumb lingering at the corner of her mouth. "You drooled on my arm." "I did not." The corner of his mouth lifted. "You did. A little. It was adorable." Alara felt heat flood her face and buried it against his shoulder to hide the blush. His laugh was a low, surprised huff, as though laughter itself had forgotten the way to him until this moment. They stayed like that, breathing each other in, until hunger and the ache of wounds forced them apart. Lucian rose first, moving stiffly because of the arrow's bite. He rebuilt the fire with one hand while keeping weight off the bandaged side. Alara watched the careful economy of his movements and felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. She found dried meat and hard journey bread in a sealed crock, along with a small jar of honey. Simple fare, but after weeks of dungeon slop, it tasted like a feast. They ate sitting shoulder to shoulder on the furs, passing the honey between them, fingers brushing every time the jar changed hands. When the last crumb was gone, silence settled again. Not awkward, but full. Outside, the forest was waking, ravens calling, snow sliding from heavy branches in soft thuds. Lucian spoke first. 3 nights until full moon. Alara's stomach tightened. And then? Then the bond will demand completion. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him, storm gray darkened with fear and longing. The wolf will want to claim what is his. I can fight it. I have fought it for centuries, but never on a moon this strong, never with the scent of my mate in my lungs. He used the word deliberately. Mate. It hung between them like a drawn blade. Alara set the empty honey jar aside. And if I say no? His shoulders sagged, just a fraction. Then I take you north anyway, to the stronghold at Wolvenreach. You'll be safe, free. I'll stay far enough away that the bond can't force itself on you. It will feel like dying, but I have died slowly before. The calm acceptance in his voice broke something inside her. And if I don't want you to die slowly? She asked. Lucian's breath caught. Alara? She moved before courage failed her, climbing into his lap to straddle his thighs. His hands rose instinctively to steady her hips, then froze, afraid to hold too tight. I'm not asking for forever yet, she said, cupping his face. I'm asking for honesty. What happens if we let the bond finish what it started in that dungeon? His pupils blew wide, swallowing silver. You become mine in the old way. My scent on your skin, my mark on your body. The pack will know you as Luna whether you choose the title or not. And you... His voice cracked. You will feel me always. Even if you leave, even if you hate me later, a piece of my soul will live inside you. That is the price. Alara searched his face for any hint of coercion and found only raw, aching truth. I spent my whole life afraid of belonging to anyone, she said softly. My village feared what I could do with storms. The church wanted to own it. Even my own mother looked at me like I might burn the house down in my sleep. She traced the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. But you look at me like I'm the storm and the hearth both. Like I'm allowed to be both. You are, he said fiercely. Then I'm tired of being afraid. She leaned in until their lips almost touched. Kiss me, Lucian. Not because the moon demands it. Because you want to. A broken sound escaped him. Half growl, half prayer. Then his mouth was on hers. It was not gentle. It was 300 years of starvation meeting a lifetime of loneliness, and it burned. His hands slid up her back, pressing her closer, as if he could meld them into one creature. Alara kissed him back with everything the Inquisition had failed to break, every spark of defiance, every ember of hope. She tasted honey and pine and the faint copper of his wound, and beneath it all the wild, impossible flavor of moonlight. When they broke apart, both were shaking. Lucian rested his forehead against hers. I swore I would never take without consent. You're not taking, she whispered. I'm choosing. His eyes searched hers, desperate for the lie and finding none. Slowly, reverently, he lifted her right hand and pressed it over the Moonclaw brand. The mark flared beneath her palm again, hotter this time, sending liquid heat racing through her veins. Look, he breathed. She followed his gaze. Beneath the edge of her sleeve, on the inside of her wrist, a faint silver crescent was rising, mirror to his own mark, delicate as frost. It didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. Alara stared, stunned. Already? The bond knows its own, he said, voice rough with wonder. Even half finished, it marks you. Outside, a wolf howled, close, urgent. Another answered, then a third. Lucian stiffened, head tilting. They've found the trail, he said. The church sent trackers with silver hounds. We have perhaps an hour. Alara's heart lurched, but not with fear. With certainty. Then we don't run anymore, she said. Lucian looked at her sharply. She rose, pulling him with her. Take me to Wolven Reach. Let them come. I'm done hiding what I am. Witch, stormcaller, whatever I'm becoming. And I'm done letting them decide who I belong to. Lucian's smile was slow, feral, and utterly beautiful. My Luna, he said, tasting the title like a vow. He whistled, 3 sharp notes. Moments later, wolves melted from the trees, massive beasts with eyes that glowed with intelligence. One enormous white female approached and dipped her head to Alara in unmistakable respect. Lucian swung onto the back of a huge black male that could only be his second. Then he reached down for her. Alara took his hand without hesitation and let him pull her up in front of him. His arms locked around her waist. The cloak, their cloak, billowed behind them like a banner. As the pack turned north, running swift as wind over snow, Alara felt the crescent on her wrist burn brighter. The bond was waking fully now, and for the first time in her life, the storm inside her sang instead of screamed. Far behind, church bells clanged in frantic alarm. Ahead, the mountains opened their ancient arms, and the wolves carried their king and his chosen Luna toward a reckoning centuries in the making. Chapter 6. The Road of Frozen Stars. They rode through a world made of ice and silence. The wolves ran without tiring, paws skimming the snow as though it bowed before them. Alara sat in the cradle of Lucian's arms, the heat of his body the only thing keeping the winter from finding her bones. Wind whipped her hair across his cheek. Every time it did, he turned his face into it, breathing her in like a starving man stealing crumbs of air. Hours bled away. The sun climbed, pale and distant, then began its slow fall toward the jagged teeth of the iron fangs. No one spoke. Words felt too small for what was growing between them, root and claw and lightning all at once. At dusk they crested a ridge and the land opened. Below lay a hidden valley ringed by black pines and silver waterfalls frozen mid-leap. At its heart rose Wolven Reach. Not a castle of stone, but a living fortress grown from the mountain itself. Towers of pale wood and bone-white stone twisted upward like antlers, windows glowing amber against the snow. Wolves moved on the walls, some on 4 legs, some on 2, and every one of them turned as the pack approached. Lucian slowed his mount. The great black wolf beneath them dipped his head, and the entire valley answered with a single, rolling howl that shivered the air and made Alara's new crescent mark flare like molten metal. She felt Lucian's arms tighten, protective and proud at once. They know, he murmured against her ear. They smell you on me. They smell me on you. A tremor ran through her, not fear, but the magnitude of it. An entire hidden nation was looking at her, and instead of shrinking, she straightened her spine. Lucian dismounted first, then lifted her down as though she were made of glass and starlight. The moment her bare feet touched the snow, the wolves on the wall fell silent. Hundreds of eyes, gold, amber, ice blue, watched her walk forward wrapped in the Alpha King's cloak, blood still staining the hem from the night before. An old woman stepped from the shadows of the gate. Her hair was white as moonlit frost, her eyes the same glowing silver as Lucian's when the wolf rose close to the surface. She wore robes of wolf pelt and carried a staff carved from ancient antler. Lucian inclined his head, not quite a bow, but the deepest respect he seemed capable of giving anyone. "Seer Mother Astrid," he said formally, "I bring Alara Voss, my mate, my Luna." Astrid's gaze sliced straight through Alara, sharp as winter wind. Then, to Alara's shock, the old woman sank to one knee in the snow. Gasps rippled through the gathered wolves. Astrid's voice carried, cracked with age but strong as iron. "The moon returns to us at last. Welcome home, child of storms." Alara's throat closed. Home. The word tasted like something she had forgotten existed. Lucian's hand found hers, fingers threading tight. Astrid rose and beckoned. "Come. The moon rises soon, and there are things you both must see before the bond finishes its song." They walked through corridors of living wood where lanterns of witchlight floated like captive stars. Wolves and humans, shifters all, bowed as they passed, some with awe, some with wary curiosity. Alara felt every stare, but Lucian's presence at her side was a shield nothing could pierce. At last, Astrid led them to a chamber high in the central spire. The walls were open to the sky, ringed by pillars carved with the same scenes Alara had seen in the cave. Wolves and moon-blessed women, hands clasped, fates entwined. In the center stood a pool of black water, so still it reflected the emerging stars like a piece of night torn out and laid upon the floor. Astrid gestured. "The moon mirror. Only true mates may look and see truth. The rest see only their own reflection and go mad." Lucian's grip on Alara's hand spasmed. "We don't have to." "I want to know." Alara cut in softly. "All of it." He searched her face, then nodded once. They stepped to the pool's edge together. The surface rippled though no wind touched it. Images rose. Not gentle, not kind. A boy with storm-gray eyes watching his mother burn at the stake while silver chains held him back. A young alpha kneeling in blood-soaked snow, accepting a crown he never wanted because no one else was left to wear it. Centuries of battles, of choices between mercy and survival, of nights spent alone beneath too many moons, the wolf howling for a mate who never came. Then newer visions, Lucian in the dungeon, centuries of iron control shattering the instant he saw a chained woman with storm-colored eyes and defiance carved into every line of her body. The moment the bond snapped taut, and the wolf inside him fell to its knees in worship. Alara's own memories followed, her grandmother teaching her to call rain with lullabies, the night the Inquisitors came, the pyre waiting at dawn. And threaded through all of it, like silver rope, the crescent mark on her wrist glowing brighter with every heartbeat that belonged to him. The final image was yet to come, a night 3 days hence, beneath the fullest moon in a century. A choice, a claiming, a war that would either crown them both or destroy everything they were beginning to build. The pool stilled. Alara found she was crying. Silent tears slid down her cheeks and fell into the water, sending out ripples that looked like tiny breaking hearts. Lucian turned her into his chest, arms crushing her close. "I'm sorry," he rasped against her hair. "I should never have let you see." "I needed to," she said fiercely. "I needed to see you." Astrid's voice came from behind them, soft now. "The moon mirror never lies. What it shows can be born, or it can be changed. That is the gift and the burden of true mates." She left them alone. For a long time they simply stood, wrapped around each other while the stars wheeled overhead. Finally, Lucian spoke, voice raw. "I was born cursed," he said. "The first alpha bargained with the moon goddess for power to protect his people. She granted it, but demanded a price. Every firstborn of the true bloodline would carry the beast alone until a mate strong enough to share the burden was found. 300 years, Alara. Every full moon I lost more of the man and kept more of the monster. I thought the goddess had forgotten us. He pulled back just enough to cradle her face. Then I found you in chains, and the wolf knelt for the first time in centuries. Alara rose on her toes and kissed him. Slow, deliberate, a promise. When she drew back, her tears had stopped. "I'm not strong for you," she said. "I'm strong with you. There's a difference." His eyes shimmered suspiciously bright. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. "Not for the bond, just stay." She nodded. Later, in a room of warm furs and low firelight, they lay tangled together, still clothed, still careful. Alara traced every scar she could reach, learning him by touch the way the blind learn faces. When her fingers brushed the Moonclaw brand, it flared again, and this time she felt an answering pulse low in her own body. Lucian groaned and rolled them, so she lay atop him, his hands gentle on her hips. 3 nights, he said, voice shaking with restraint. 3 nights until I can give you everything without fear of breaking you. Alara rested her head over his heart and listened to it race. "Then we'll make these 3 nights count," she murmured. Outside their window, the moon climbed higher, swollen, hungry, ancient. Inside, 2 wounded souls held each other like the last safe place in a world on fire. And somewhere far south, an army of silver and fire began to march north, led by a man who believed love was the greatest heresy of all. Chapter 7. The Weight of 3 Nights. The first of the 3 nights passed in whispers and almost touches. They did not sleep in the great Alpha's chamber with its carved beams and ancestral furs. Instead, Lucian carried her to a smaller room high in the eastern tower, one that smelled faintly of cedar and old books. A single round window looked east, toward the coming dawn. He told her, voice rough with something like shame, that it had been his mother's solar once. No one had entered it since the church took her. Alara stepped inside and felt the air itself exhale welcome. They left the door open so the pack would know their king was not hiding his mate away. Then they closed the shutters against the wind and let the fire speak for them. Lucian sat on the wide window seat and pulled her down between his legs, her back to his chest. She felt the tremor in his arms as he wrapped them around her, careful, always so careful, of the wound in his side, and the wild thing clawing behind his ribs. "Tell me something true," she said into the quiet. "Something you've never told another soul." He was silent so long she thought he would refuse. Then, "I used to come here after every battle," he said, against her temple. "I would sit exactly here and count the stars until I remembered how to be human again. Some nights I counted until sunrise and still couldn't find the man." Alara turned in his arms, kneeling to face him. Firelight painted gold across the sharp bones of his face and turned his scars into rivers of light. "You're here now," she whispered, and kissed the worst of them. The one that cut from temple to jaw, a reminder of the night his father died. He shuddered beneath her mouth like a man surfacing from deep water. They fell asleep eventually, still dressed, curled together on the window seat with a single blanket. Alara woke once near dawn to find Lucian watching her, eyes glowing soft silver in the dark. "I'm afraid I'll wake up and you'll be gone," he confessed. So low she felt it more than heard it. She answered by pressing his palm over the crescent mark on her wrist. It pulsed warm and steady, alive with both their heartbeats. "I'm not the one who vanishes," she said. "You are." He made a broken sound and buried his face in her neck, breathing her in until the sun rose and painted them both in forgiving light. The second night was harder. The moon swelled, fat and luminous, climbing the sky like a promise and a threat. Lucian's skin burned with fever. The Moonclaw brand glowed through his shirt, casting shifting shadows on the wall. He paced the solar like a caged thing, muscles locked tight against the change that wanted to rip free. Alara watched from the bed, knees drawn to her chest. At moonrise, he dropped to all fours, claws scraping stone, a growl tearing from his throat that was more pain than rage. She went to him without hesitation, kneeling in front of him, hands on either side of his straining neck. "Look at me," she commanded. Silver eyes met hers, wild and terrified. "Breathe with me." She inhaled slow, exhaled slower. After 3 breaths, he matched her. After 10, the claws retracted. After 20, he was shaking in her arms, human again, forehead pressed to hers. "I can't keep him leashed much longer," he rasped. "Tomorrow night the moon crests. If I lose control—" "You won't." She cupped his face. "Because I'll be right here holding the leash with you." He laughed, a cracked sound. "You have no idea what you're offering." "Then show me." She pulled him to the bed and laid his head in her lap, fingers threading through his hair until the trembling eased. When he finally slept, it was with her name on his lips like a prayer. The 3rd day dawned cold and still. Wolvenreach held its breath. The pack kept to the lower halls. Even the children were quiet. Astrid came at noon with a cup of something dark and bitter. "Moonblood root," she told Alara. "It will ease the worst of the change for him tonight. And for you, if you choose to drink it too, it will gentle the claiming." Alara drank without hesitation. The taste was iron and wintergreen and old promises. Lucian found her on the roof at dusk, wind whipping her hair into black banners. He moved like a man walking to his execution, every step measured, hands clenched at his sides. "They're coming," he said without greeting. "Scouts report church banners less than a day south. Silver, fire, and a high inquisitor who wears my mother's bones in a reliquary around his neck." Alara turned. The setting sun painted them both in blood and gold. "Then we finish this tonight," she said, "before they reach the valley. Let the bond be complete. Let them come to a united Alpha and Luna, not a king fighting himself." Lucian closed the distance in 2 strides and cupped her face with shaking hands. "You deserve candlelight and soft words and time," he said fiercely, "not a claiming born of war." "I've had enough soft words in my life," she answered. "They tasted like lies. Give me truth, Lucian. Give me you." His control snapped, not into violence, but surrender. He kissed her like a drowning man finally breaking the surface, like the world was ending and beginning in the same breath. She kissed him back with every storm she had ever swallowed, every tear she had never shed. When they pulled apart, the moon was rising, huge, white, merciless. Lucian rested his forehead against hers. "There's still one thing I haven't told you." Alara felt the weight of it in the air, ancient and terrible. "Tell me." He took her right hand and pressed it once more to the Moonclaw brand. This time when it flared, the light was blinding. "The first Alpha didn't just bargain for power," he said, voice barely human. "He bargained for immortality, for himself and every mate who accepted the bond. If we finish this tonight, Alara, you will never age. You will never die unless I do. That is the final secret, the final curse." The wind stilled. Somewhere far below, wolves began to sing to the rising moon. Alara looked into eyes that had watched 3 centuries pass and saw her own future reflected there. Endless winters, endless springs, endless nights with this man who had knelt in a dungeon for her. She smiled, small, fierce, utterly unafraid. "Then we'd better make forever worth it," she said. Lucien's answering smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Hand in hand they walked down from the roof toward the moon mirror chamber, where the pack waited in silence, and the swollen moon poured silver through the open sky. Behind them, on the southern horizon, torches began to climb the mountain like a tide of stars fallen wrong. Ahead, the third night waited, hungry, inevitable, and finally theirs. Chapter 8. The Claiming Moon. The moon mirror chamber had never been so full. Wolves lined the walls in both forms, some on 4 legs, some on 2, all silent, all watching. The open roof let the moon pour, straight down like molten silver, turning the black pool into a perfect circle of light. The air tasted of pine smoke, old blood, and anticipation sharp enough to cut. Lucian and Alara stood at the pool's edge, hands still clasped. The root draft had calmed the worst of the tremors in his limbs, but nothing could gentle the raw power rolling off him now. The Moonclaw brand glowed through his shirt like a living star. The matching crescent on Alara's wrist answered with steady pulses of light. Astrid stepped forward, staff tapping stone once. The sound rang like a bell. "By the old law," she declared, voice carrying to every corner. "None may witness the final binding but the moon herself. Leave us." The pack obeyed without hesitation. Even Astrid bowed and withdrew, pulling the great doors closed behind her. The click of the latch sounded final. They were alone beneath the naked sky. Lucian turned to Alara. Moonlight carved every plane of his face into something ancient and heartbreakingly young at once. "Last chance to walk away," he said, voice rough as broken stone. "Once this begins, there is no undoing." Alara answered by reaching for the laces of his shirt. Her fingers did not shake. "I have been undone since the moment you stepped into my cell," she said. "Finish it." His breath left him in a rush. He let her strip the shirt from him, let her trace every scar, every ridge of muscle, every mark of centuries spent keeping the world at bay. When she pressed her lips to the Moonclaw brand, the light flared so bright it painted the walls white. Lucian's hands rose to the cloak still wrapped around her. His cloak, now truly hers. He unfastened it slowly, reverently, letting it pool at their feet. Beneath, she wore only the simple linen shift Astrid had given her, thin as moonlight. He touched it like it was spun glass. "Tell me again," he whispered. "I choose you," she said clearly. "All of you. Man, wolf, king, monster. I choose forever." A growl tore from his chest. Not threat, but exultation. He lifted her against him, mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted of desperation and homecoming. The bond roared between them, no longer a thread but a river, sweeping away every wall either of them had ever built. They sank to the furs someone had spread beside the pool. Lucian laid her down as though she were the moon itself, and he the tide that could not resist her pull. His hands shook as he slid the shift from her shoulders, bearing her to the night, and to him. Alara arched into his touch, unafraid. Every place his mouth traveled. Throat, collarbone, the soft slope of her breast, left trails of silver light beneath her skin, as though the moon were writing its claim through him. When his teeth grazed the hollow where neck met shoulder, she felt the wolf rise fully. His eyes bled pure silver. Claws pricked her hips without breaking skin. He paused, trembling with the effort of restraint. "Alara," he rasped, voice no longer entirely human. "It will hurt at first. Then it will bind us soul to soul." She cupped his face, thumbs stroking the sharp line of his cheekbones. "I have known worse pain," she said. "Give me the one that heals." He kissed her once more, deep, claiming, worshipful, then bent to the curve of her shoulder. The bite came swift and sure. Fangs piercing flesh, ancient words in a language older than mountains rumbling against her skin. Pain flared white-hot, then melted into liquid starlight. Alara cried out, back bowing as the bond slammed home. She felt him. Every memory, every grief, every fierce joy he had locked away for centuries. And she gave him hers in return. The scent of rain on her grandmother's herbs. The night the sky answered her rage. The moment she saw a wolf king kneel in a dungeon and knew she was no longer alone. The moonclaw brand on his chest and the crescent on her wrist blazed as one. Light poured from them, filling the chamber until the pool reflected two silhouettes surrounded by living silver. Lucian withdrew his fangs and licked the wound closed, gentle as a benediction. The mark he left was a perfect crescent moon edged in tiny claw marks. His promise and her acceptance twined forever. Alara's vision blurred with tears and moonlight. She reached for him, pulling him down until their bodies aligned, skin to skin, heart to frantic heart. "Mine," she whispered against his lips. "Yours," he answered, voice shaking with wonder. "Always yours." They moved together then, slow, deliberate, learning the shape of eternity in each other's arms. Every touch, every sigh, every shared breath wove the bond tighter until there was no space left where one ended and the other began. When release came, it shattered them both and rebuilt them whole. Afterward, they lay tangled beneath the open sky, moonlight bathing the new mark on her shoulder and the matching glow fading slowly from their skin. Lucian traced the bite with reverent fingers. "It's beautiful," he said, voice hushed with awe. Alara turned to study his face. The centuries of loneliness were still there, etched in faint lines around his eyes, but something luminous had taken root beneath them. "So are you," she said. He laughed, the sound startled and free, and kissed her again, soft and lingering. The moon began its descent, sated. But far below, in the valley, war horns sounded. Distant, yet growing louder. Lucian lifted his head, ears catching what human ones could not. His arms tightened around her. "They're here," he said quietly. "Earlier than we thought." Alara rose, unashamed of her nakedness, of the mark that now proclaimed her Luna in every sense. She felt power coil inside her, not just the bond, but something older, storm-born and newly awakened. "Then let them come," she said, and her voice carried the rumble of distant thunder. "They wanted a witch and a monster. They'll get both." Lucian stood beside her, magnificent and unafraid, the Alpha King fully claimed and finally complete. Together they walked to the edge of the roof. Below, the pack was already gathering, wolves and warriors, eyes glowing in the pre-dawn dark. When they saw their king and his marked Luna step into view, a single howl rose, fierce, joyous, unbreakable. Alara raised her arms. Lightning answered, forking across the clearing sky in silent promise. Lucian took her hand, lacing their fingers so the twin marks touched. Side by side, newly bound and newly born, they looked south toward the coming fire, and the storm, for the first time in her life, was not afraid. Chapter 10. The Quiet After the Storm. The valley smelled of blood, pine, and thawing earth. For 3 days, Woven Reach did nothing but breathe. Wounded were carried to the healing halls. Fallen were named and mourned beneath the open sky. Children who had hidden in the deep caves crept out to stare at the scorch marks, where lightning had kissed stone, and to touch, in hushed awe, the hem of their Luna's cloak as she passed. Alara never left Lucian's side. They moved through the aftermath like one body, her hand in his, or his arm around her waist, or simply the brush of shoulders that sent warmth spiraling through the bond. The bite on her shoulder had settled into a raised silver crescent that glowed faintly when he was near. She caught him tracing it with reverent fingers whenever he thought she wasn't looking. On the third evening, they climbed the eastern ridge alone. The sun bled gold across the snow, turning the world soft and forgiving. Below them, Wolvenreach's lanterns were being lit one by one, tiny stars against the coming dark. Lucian stopped at the crest and pulled her back against his chest, arms folding over hers. For a long time they simply stood, listening to the wind move through the pines. "I keep waiting to wake up," he said at last, voice low. 300 years of mornings, and none of them ever felt real until this one. Alara turned in his arms. The wind had loosened his hair. Black strands whipped across his cheekbones. There were new lines around his eyes, not from age, but from the simple, overwhelming relief of no longer carrying everything alone. "I know the feeling," she said. "I spent my whole life bracing for the next blow. I don't know how to stop." He brushed his thumb across her lower lip. "Then we learn together." She rose on her toes and kissed him, slow, deliberate, tasting the words neither of them had yet said aloud. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "I love you," he said, the confession rough and perfect. "I fought it for centuries, thought I was too broken for it, but the bond knew better. You are the only home I have ever had, Alara Blackthorn." The name slipped out naturally, as though it had always belonged to her. Tears pricked her eyes. "And you are mine, Lucian Blackthorn. Every scarred, stubborn, impossible inch of you." They kissed again, deeper this time, until the wind itself seemed to hush around them. When they drew apart, the first stars were pricking the sky. Alara felt something shift inside her chest, an opening, a settling, the last piece of a puzzle sliding into place. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. Lucian stilled, reading the tremor in her voice through the bond. She took his hand and pressed it low against her belly. For a moment he only stared, uncomprehending. Then his eyes widened, silver flooding the gray. "Alara, the moon mirror showed me," she whispered. "The night of the claiming. A child, our child, born beneath the first new moon of spring. A bridge between storm and wolf. The curse truly ends with her." Lucian dropped to his knees in the snow as though the weight of joy was too much to bear standing. He pressed his lips to her stomach, once, twice, reverent, trembling. "A daughter," he breathed, voice cracking. "God's Alara. A daughter." She threaded her fingers through his hair. "She'll have your eyes," she teased softly. "And my terrible temper." He laughed, the sound startled and free and young, and rose to crush her against him. "I will build her a world where no one ever chains her for what she is," he vowed against her neck. "I swear it on every moon I have left." Alara believed him. She felt the oath settle into the bond like another knot in an unbreakable rope. They stayed on the ridge until the stars wheeled overhead and the valley below was fully alight with celebration. Somewhere far off, wolves sang. Not mourning now, but welcome. Later, in the great hall, the pack feasted. Tables groaned beneath venison and honey cakes, flagons of mead and winter wine. Astrid stood at the head table and raised her cup. "To the Alpha King who knelt," she proclaimed, "and to the Luna who taught him how to rise again." The roar that answered shook dust from the rafters. Lucian stood, pulling Alara up beside him. He did not speak. Words were too small. Instead, he lifted their joined hands, showing the glowing marks that matched perfectly now. Moonclaw and crescent, king and queen, wolf and storm. The pack howled until the very mountains seemed to answer. Much later, when the fires burned low and most had sought their beds, Lucian carried Alara to the Alpha's chamber, their chamber now. Moonlight spilled through the high windows, painting silver across the firs. He laid her down gently, as though she were the most precious thing in all his centuries. "We have forever," he murmured against her skin, mapping the new life between them with wondering hands. But I find I am greedy for every single minute of it. Alara smiled and drew him down to her. Then take them all, she whispered, starting with this one. Outside, the moon, no longer swollen with hunger, but serene and whole, looked down on Wolvenreach and, for the first time in 300 years, found nothing left to demand. Inside, a Wolf King and his Storm Queen learned the shape of peace in each other's arms, while beneath their joined hands, a tiny new heartbeat answered the song of the bond. The curse was broken. The storm had found its harbor, and the North, at long last, was home. Word count, 1,032. Epilogue. One spring later. Snowmelt roared in every creek, and the high meadows were carpeted with the first green fire of the year. On a ridge above Wolvenreach, beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at, Alara stood barefoot in the new grass, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in silver wolf pelt. Lucian knelt beside her, one arm around her waist, the other supporting the child's head with the same reverence he had once shown the moon itself. Their daughter opened storm-gray eyes, already ringed with faint silver, and stared at the world as though she had been waiting centuries to meet it. Alara laughed through tears. She has your glare. Lucian's answering smile was soft and shattered and perfect. And your storm, he said. Far below, the pack howled welcome to the new moon's daughter. Above them, the sky, clear, endless, and finally kind, held its breath in wonder. And in the heart of the North, a legend that had begun in chains and blood ended in lullabies and spring, forever after all, had only just begun.